All right, back again. Getting further into Wittgenstein this Sunday evening. It was fun. It's fun to do. Isn't it? I've heard. Look, it's not fun. It's not fun for me either. That's why I'm doing it. I won't do it otherwise, or I'll do it much slower. I'll end up rereading the fucking Passenger again, which I want to do anyway. Here, before we get into that, see. I finished Stella yesterday. When her Aunt Helen came to visit, she asked the girl what she wanted to be when she grew up, and she said dead. I'm being serious. So am I. No, you're not. You're being flippant and morbid. Now, what would you like to be? Terminally ill? Her aunt got up and left the room. All kinds of humor like that throughout the Pastor. Stella Maris is a because they have a big mouth? No, because they get people off the hook. Because they get off the hook. Because they, shit. I don't know the answer. Hey, Ms. Hey, Lexi, Angel, Ryan. All right, that's terrible because that could apply to any kind of fish. I was trying to think of things specific to bass, and that just... I'm sorry, Ryan. With the profile picture like that, I thought you would have something hitting a little harder. Could be any fish. Bass doesn't enter into it. I'm sitting there trying to think through what are the unique characteristics of a bass that one might make a joke at. There are largemouth bass. There are striped bass. There are sea bass. Striped. Could do something with striped uniforms and jail, old-timey jail uniform. I don't know. Okay, this is it, though. Rana. All right. Fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice. No. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice. Point is, this is it. Okay. What do you call a group of singing kitchens? I'm going to say something with a cappella. Can we rhyme something with something quartet? Something a kitchen quartet. Something with a stove. A kitchenette. That's it. That's it, Ryan. No more. Terrible. How old are you, Ryan? Ryan, are you my son? Anyway, I finished reading Stella Maris, and it's short. It's only, 200 pages maybe. The whole thing is a dialogue between the protagonist. I think I already went over this. Protagonist and her psychiatrist. You're 21. Do you find these ironically funny? You don't find them genuinely funny. Is that correct? Look, Lexi, I have no problem with dad jokes. I like a good dad joke. These are not good dad jokes. These are the kind of jokes you find in books left on top of a reservoir in the toilet. You know what I'm saying? Am I being a dick? Sorry. I've been feeling like a dick. I've had so much sort of suppressed anger that's been surfacing. My mood is so erratic lately. It's been terrible. And it's Elon Musk's fault. And it's Jordan Peterson's fault. And you know what? It's the fault of everybody who thinks that they're worth 2 farts in the wind. There's an old-timey reference. They're not worth 2 farts in the wind. Now, come on, Cordy. Hey, I feel like we got a lot covered the last time we did this, and you were a big part of that. Yeah, I have things that I do. I saw an Instagram post of yours, Lexi. I want to say you were, this is going to end up sounding insulting. I can't win. I want to say you were dressed up as a giant rat. Giant rat? Or a capybara? Or a mule? Maybe a bird of some kind? I don't know what it was, but you were hugging your hubby. I'll see you. So it was not old. But it was good. It looked the costume looked good, and it was funny, and it made me chuckle. More, I'm sorry to say, more than Ryan's jokes did. You know, never forget that.
Germans had a really cool leader at one time.
Oh, this is what you meant when you said you were nutcrackered out. Okay, that's pretty neat. Well, you know, so you had nothing to do with the costume, making the costume, Lexi. It was. I noticed like the fur was interesting looking. I didn't scrutinize it that closely. I was doom scrolling. I was in the middle of a doom scroll. I was trying to recover from Elon Musk's tweet where he said that his pronouns were prosecute Fauci, which like insults like 5 or 6 different groups of people in just a few words. You know, which the beauty of Twitter is the art of offending as many people as you can in as few words as possible. But then he's also upping the length of tweets to 4,000 letters, which just flies in the face of the purpose of what Twitter is. And I can state, I think, with some degree of certitude, in my experience as both a writer and content creator and designer for massive multiplayer online games and mobile games, there's a reason why 256 characters, 512 characters, I mean, apart from obviously the bit-byte correlation, there's a reason that there are character limits, or that character limits make things parsable. And I remember when Twitter was nascent, when it was a little baby tweeter, and I remember thinking originally, like my original Twitter account is very old. I'm probably as old as Twitter itself. It's got to be 15 years old or more than that. I don't remember. I don't remember when Twitter came out, but anyway, I was never more than an egg, and I, tweeted once or twice, and then didn't go back to it for a really long time because there was a part of me that was just like, well, this is just ridiculous, right? Like I can't say what I want to say in the number of letters that I'm afforded here. And then I came to appreciate the brevity of it and what it sort of, it really made you think like an editor instead of a blabbermouth. Right? I mean, some blabbermouth still seemed to flourish, but there you go. I don't know. So I think he does see himself for who he truly is, and he's desperately, desperately using all the money at his disposal to try and fight off that grim vision that he has of like who he is and what he will be and how he will be remembered. And he was perfectly fine, when people were playing, when he was getting voice roles on Rick and Morty, when he was part of the sort of the zeitgeist of the progressive, dare I say it, even like the Green New Deal types, right? He was perfectly fine playing along with that. And he was, of course, like politically, he was perfectly fine accepting as many government subsidies as he could get his grubby little hands on, and advocating for them as he, usurped power from the hands of the founders of corporations. Ryan, you didn't need to do this. You didn't need to do this. That was very kind. Some of the things I have written for. Okay, first of all, you could say some of the things I wrote for. You cannot say some of the things I have wrote for. So, come on. I'm giving you your $5 worth there. Everybody most people know where my writing, I've written on some game review sites, but primarily, my writing has either been as a copy editor, but predominantly as a game designer and game writer. I did not miss. I wish that I wrote The Lusty Argonian Maid. I'm almost positive I know who wrote The Lusty Argonian Maid, and the majority of those books. And I think that guy is a genius. And I really wanted to rehire him. But apparently he was blackballed at ZeniMax Bethesda because of some beef between him and Todd Howard that maybe I signed an NDA I shouldn't be talking about. I don't know, but I don't give a fuck, so it doesn't matter. Anyone who's on any of the Elder Scrolls boards knows Michael Kirkbride, knows the name Michael Kirkbride. He was like, when it came to Elder Scrolls writing, like he was my Frank Herbert, right? He was the person I looked at and read and was like, now this guy is fucking weird. And he thinks of some weird shit, and I want to do this for the Elder Scrolls Online. Didn't really work out that way. We got some of that weirdness, and we were doing, Argonians are weird. They have some strange. Why am I talking about this? I'm getting sucked into this. It's like I'm wondering if the moon actually
a big part of the tides is the
has anything to do with the tides.
Is that what causes the tides?
Huh. Really? The moon? The moon affects the tides. That's insane. I'm having trouble believing that. Let's see.
Well, you were pretty mean to Senator Warren, though, on Twitter recently. You slammed her, man. Please don't call the manager on me,
Lies,
Senator
lies,
Karen.
Lies.
She struck first,
Lies.
obviously.
Right.
Yes, she did.
She called me a freeloader
Yeah.
and a grifter who doesn't pay taxes, basically. And I'm literally paying the most tax.
Liar. He's a liar. I mean, technically, not a liar. He did pay more taxes than anybody that year, but he did not pay proportionally the correct amount of taxes. What D&D class do I think reflects my personality? What do I mean, I want to say there's what I want it to be, and then what it like probably really is, right? I want it to be a rogue, and a roguish rogue at that. I'm probably a bard, unfortunately. And probably a bard. Or I want to be a magic user. Yeah, back, they used to call them magic users. That was the actual class name in first edition. Magic user. They had names that corresponded to levels. Sorcerer was not the name of your class, it was the name of your level. Myrmidon. Wizard. Archmage. Mage. These were indicators of your ability, not of your job. Your job was magic user. You used magic. Warlock was also a level. I want to say, I remember it was level 7 because I was one of the cool sounding ones. I wanted to get my magic user, who's my main when I was a child. I started playing Dungeons and Dragons when I was 7. His name was Zion Blackson. I never changed his name, as ridiculous as it was. And I played with him until I was playing the immortal levels, essentially. Where essentially, the characters were gods. You don't see me as a bard. Well, I mean, I'm not. I don't know. Maybe a magic user, I suppose. I want to be a rogue. That's what I want to be. Or I want to be like a magic user in the mold of Raceland from the Dragonlance series. I want to be driven evil by the horrors of the world. Don't even joke about druid. I would definitely not be a druid. These are specialist classes, are they not? At this point, look, I'm old school. Do you? Now we really are getting sidetracked, but I'm fine with it. Check this out. I can confirm. Right, we're going to talk about Wittgenstein and language games, and instead I'm busting out first edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. It's been a bit since I've looked at them, so obviously like this, everybody knows this one. Yeah, I mean these are the OGs, right? So Player's Handbook. Let's take a look at these classes here. Even back then, you had multi-classed characters, though, which is what they did instead of specialists. Let's see. Minimum fees for assassination. Here's the magic user. Okay. Shit, I was wrong. Warlock is level 8. Level 7 is Enchanter. But I was very close. So, yeah, for magic users, you start as a prestidigitator, evoker, conjurer, theurgist, magician, enchanter, warlock, sorcerer, necromancer, wizard, and then it's wizard 12th level. I thought there was mage and archmage. Oh, yeah. Archmage is wizard 18th level. Illusionists. Yeah, their names are not as cool. They start as a prestidigitator. Everybody's cantripping out with their prestidigitation. Minor trickster, master trickster, kabbalist, visionist, phantasmist, apparitionist, spellbinder. I like that. I don't remember that though. I don't think I ever played an illusionist. What the hell is this? Oh, wow, interesting. So yeah, 1978. This is 47 years old. 46 years old. I mean, just as a kid, like these little sketches, and I think these were all like David Trampier. Just incredible, huh? Really got you into it. And I remember there was like a, I don't know, I think actually on the basic set, there was like an age recommendation, and I was a year below the age recommendation, and I just thought that was so cool of me. That was so cool. It was like ages 8 to 80, but I was 7. The druids, why does it say, wait, no. Why is it, yeah, druids are a subclass of clerics here. So yeah, acolyte, adept, priest, curate, canon, lama, patriarch, high priest. But like those titles, that's what I yearned for, right? I wanted to be a warlock. I wanted to be an archmage. I wanted to be able to like call myself that. Fighters, whatever, veteran, warrior, swordsman, hero, swashbuckler, myrmidon, champion, superhero, lord. You gotta have interesting titles. This guy is fighting in hell. These are literally devils that he's fighting. There's a bone devil. Bone devil right there. And I don't know. He does not look too... I mean, he's in plate armor. But it's just easy to cook you in. It's like going to getting yourself out of the frying pan into the fryer in your own personalized frying pan. Paladins had terrible level titles. Anyway, my point is Rangers had good ones because they had... Strider was one. Strider was, of course, Aragorn's name. But yeah, this is what got me in. This is where I came into, or more or less where I came into D&D, and the type of D&D that I was playing. By the time 2nd edition came out, I was already losing some interest, I think. And then by the time to hit AC0 was abandoned. By that time, I think, I was abandoning tabletop games for computer games because, tabletop games did not yet have the sort of retro nostalgia that they got after computer games ate their lunch for a decade or two. Hey, Lisa, how are you doing? You did, Ryan, you did. I mean, if you're just looking them up, that takes away some of the, I don't know, some of the personal stuff. This is why I always wanted to be a dungeon master too, was the ability to put these things up and do stuff behind them, and your players would want to see what your die rolls were, and you'd peek out and no, you can't see this. Oh my God, you won't believe what just happened. Savings throws and attack matrices. Look, and this was pre-Excel. This probably took someone quite a bit of time. And here, Errol Otis did this, right? Errol Otis was one of my favorite illustrators for Dungeons and Dragons because his style was just so weird. Like everything was kind of fat. I don't know how to say it. Like not fat, but everything felt like rounded. Like even things that weren't supposed to be round. Like even that spear this dude is holding. Like the tip of it almost seems like it's just a big round teardrop. And he had interesting choice in colors when he would do stuff. This is Donald Sutherland, who did, that's obviously the player's handbook. But Errol Otis did a lot of like the pre-advanced Dungeons and Dragons stuff. He did a lot of the basic kit and the expert kit and the just regular old D&D stuff. Yes, exactly, QWERTY. Like Errol Otis drew thick. All right. If we don't get back on track, I fear we never will. Not the end of the world, but I did want to get some of this done. So I didn't, stop. I didn't stop reading, just to wait until I could do this again. I continued reading, and we had sort of left off on some pretty basic establishing principles that he was going through. That I feel like the TLDR on it was something like, okay, when we're talking about language, you can do a lot with memorization and get by without understanding the concepts or the systems behind what those sounds you're making and what I correlate them to, what those things mean, right? Lisa, this doesn't sound like super. It's the I guess. See, I pick up. I can pick up on those kinds of subtle cues that make me think maybe you're not really doing so well. By the way, maybe, I don't know if anyone has noticed this or not, but yes, I've been wearing this jacket like nonstop for a month. I change what's underneath it, but this jacket has been seeing a lot of use. It's not that warm. Yeah, this was true too, QWERTY, right? Yeah, yes, that's true too. Hi, Loriander. Corridimus, hey. 5th edition. That 5th edition, that was the Keith. I actually got back in. Was that 5th edition? I got back in around 2014. I want to say that was 5th edition, when it was totally kind of redesigned from the ground up. I did that because I was working on a game that was basically Dungeons and Dragons, right? Hi, Kiss the Go-Goat. Oh, that's very kind. Oh, I like your. Oh, we got some Papa Emeritus going on there. I don't 100% get the Go-Goat, greatest of all time, or is that a Ghost reference that I don't get? My knowledge of Ghost is cursory. I like Square Hammer. Call Me Little Sunshine. Impera. A couple of others. Oh, okay. Well, there you go. Miz, you know that I like Ghost. Like that was one of the things. It got found out on stream. You want me to sing you some? I will say that, like, Tobias Forge can write a really good song. Great stagecraft. But the live versions, like some of the recorded versions of Ghost songs, are pretty layered. And sometimes live, they just don't sound all that great. They look great. Loriander, have I ever toyed with the movie script? No. I don't have that level of concentration or disillusionment about my own abilities. Well, I did say something about Tobias Forge. I love him. He's great. I really like that, he kind of goes against the grain of what you might expect. Hi, Diego Lopez. How are you doing? See, I would not call Ghost black metal at all. But again, maybe that's the Ghost that I listen to. It's more like power metal or pop metal. I'm not trying to ding it in any way here. But black metal, I think, requires more than makeup. But hey, that's also where I'm getting sidetracked again. Oh, got you. Okay, yes. Gotcha. All right. Okay. I'm sorry. Sorry that I've clearly touched a nerve with you. Tobias Forge is amazing. He's been around long enough, so he was around in the Mayhem Emperor, Celtic Frost days. Diego, you're prepping for final exams this week. Well, good luck to you. How's everything with me? Whatever, it's winter and the world is falling apart. So make of that what you will. Lisa, I'm sorry you're in a funk. I hope that you're able to get out of it in short order. Right. Unless it's a P-funk. All right. So the only way to do this is just to kind of jump right in and then try and backwardsly contextualize some of this. So I have my mild liner. I have my Post-it page markers. And let's get right into the section that I'm in now is philosophy of psychology. So it's not going to be a direct continuation of where we were during the last video because I've been reading since then. So we're actually starting back at 1. Let's see what he's got to say. And I stopped here because I thought, well, this would be a great place to pick up for a video. So please, like, the intention of this is it'd be great if this were an open discourse. And I'm trying to understand some of this stuff and get the multiple levels of meaning out of this stuff as much as anybody in the last video, you know. I am an admitted dilettante. I'm just trying to learn. So please, you know, call me out. All right, 1. One can imagine an animal angry, fearful, sad, joyful, startled, but not hopeful. And why not? I don't know if I agree with that. Like, just right in the first sentence, I don't know if I agree with that. A dog believes his master is at the door. But can he also believe that his master will come the day after tomorrow? And what can he not do here? How do I do it? What answer am I supposed to give to this? Can only those hope who can talk? Only those who have mastered the use of language? That seems to like totally disregard pattern recognition in forms other than language. It's a form of language for me. If I leave the house every day at 9 and come back at 5, it's kind of a form of language whereby I'm leaving every day at 9 and coming home at 5, and the information I am implicitly conveying to the person at the house is, tomorrow I'll be back at 5. Now, whether or not, like if I tell you I'll be back at 5 tomorrow, I could still die and I wouldn't be back at 5. I would break that promise. It doesn't make the information that's being conveyed there still seems to be the same to me. And I mean, dogs are trained and Pavlovianly trained. And what was that? I saw a recent, I don't know if it was a tweet or whatnot, but it was something about, I always wondered if Pavlov thought about his dog every time he heard a bell ring. I thought that was kind of funny. This is what I'm saying, Lexi. I don't think that's true either. But a lot of times I've been finding as I read this, right, like I will read something and I'll be like, I don't agree with this. And then he'll get to it, right? And not necessarily, not saying that like he changes my mind, but he'll actually be like, well, no. I'm just saying it's very possible in the next few paragraphs here he might say, no, language is not required for hope. Yes, Cayman Cider, hello, by the way. Right. There are more advanced languages that have nothing to do with speech, smell, sounds, movement. Even a cat tail can communicate. Yes, exactly. Right. Language is not just words, right? But he's asking these questions rhetorically, so I'm guessing he's going to answer them similarly to how we are answering them here. Can only those hope who can talk, only those who have mastered the use of a language? That is to say, the manifestations of hope are modifications of this complicated form of life. If a concept points to a characteristic of human handwriting, it has no application to beings that do not write. No. Let's continue, because I feel like he's maybe trying to come to a greater point here. 2, grief describes a pattern which recurs with different variations in the tapestry of life. If a man's bodily expression of sorrow and of joy alternated, say, with the ticking of a clock, here we would not have the characteristic course of the pattern of sorrow or of the pattern of joy. Okay, I'm going to keep going because I feel like these are getting to something, and to dissect each one, we might be missing the point. So 3, for a second he felt violent pain. Why does it sound odd to say, for a second he felt deep grief. Only because it so seldom happens? Well, no, I don't think that either. I think that it's strange to say for a second he felt deep grief, because grief tends not to be transient in that way. But don't you feel grief now? But aren't you playing chess now? The answer may be affirmative, but this does not make the concept of grief any more like the concept of sensation. Okay, see? He's going somewhere. The question was really, of course, the temporal and personal one, not the logical question we wanted to ask. I must tell you, I am frightened. I must tell you, it horrifies me. Well, one can say this in a smiling tone of voice, too. Yeah, anything can be a joke, right? And do you mean to tell me that he doesn't feel it? How else does he know it? But even if it's a report, he does not learn it from his feelings. Let me read that again. And do you mean to tell me he doesn't feel it? So if I say, I must tell you it horrifies me, and I'm just saying it in sort of a blasé way. Do I mean to tell you he doesn't feel it? How else does he know it? So I think the point that it's trying to make here is you can't state that and mean it unless you actually feel it as you say it. So you're reporting on the thing that you're feeling, but the thing has to be there for you to report on it. Otherwise, that's the only way that you know that you're feeling it, right? And he's getting more to that. 6, suppose the feelings are produced by gestures of horror. The words, it horrifies me, are themselves such a gesture. So when you were talking about, like a cat's tail moving and being a sort of, oh, good night, Lexi. Thank you for hanging out. Same with you, Coritimus. But when you were saying, a cat tail moving is a form of language, there you go, right? It's a gesture. And the words themselves are gestures. And when I hear and feel them as I utter them, this belongs among the rest of those feelings. Now, why should the wordless gesture be the ground of the verbal one? I would think the answer to that would be because the feeling comes before the gesture to reference it, right? I mean, that seems like a pretty simple thing to say or think, and then that makes me just think, well, I must be wrong. Surely it can't be that simple. 7, if someone says, when I heard this word, it meant blank to me, he is referring to a point in time and a way of using the word. Of course, it is this combination that we fail to grasp. And the expression, I was then going to say blank, refers to a point in time and to an action. Right. Okay. So I think what he's getting to here are the idea of the references used in these expressions that are unique to them, that separate them from other expressions. Okay, yeah, the references that are essential to the utterance are the ones which would make us translate an otherwise unfamiliar kind of expression into this, our customary form. Let me read that again too. For me, not for you. The references that are essential to the utterance are the ones which would make us translate an otherwise unfamiliar kind of expression into this, our customary form. Okay. I think I see a direction emerging here. But I don't want to end up sounding like an idiot. So I'm going to keep going. And then when I'm confirmed, I'll be like, that's exactly what I was thinking. And I'll say that regardless of if it comes to the point that I was thinking or not. Someone who is unable to say the word till can be both a verb and 8. Someone who is unable to say that the word till can be both a verb and a conjunction, or to construct sentences in which it was now the one and now the other. Okay, so this is words meaning different things and serving different purposes in different contexts. Someone who is unable to do that would be unable to manage simple schoolroom exercises. But a schoolboy is not asked to take the word in one way or another out of any context, or to report how he has taken it. So, right, we make these sort of universal definitions of what things mean, and those definitions don't take things like, they just don't take nuance into account. 9, the words "the rose is red" are senseless if the word "is" has the same meaning, is identical with. Does this mean if you utter this sentence and the meaning is in the sign of identity, the sense disintegrates? Does it mean that? Does it mean that? So, if you were to say the rose is identical with red, I mean, it would be tautological, right? That would be a tautology. It's not tautological to say the rose is red. It is tautological to say the rose is the rose, and it is at least partially tautological to say the rose is identical with red. Okay. We take a sentence and tell someone the meaning of each of its words. In this way, one learns how to apply them, and so how to apply the sentence too. If we had chosen a senseless sequence of words instead of our sentence, he would not learn how to apply that sequence. And if one explains the word "is" as the sign of identity, then he doesn't learn how to use the sentence, "the rose is red." Okay, that's getting somewhere interesting. And yet there's something right about this disintegration of the sense. You get it in the following example. One might tell someone, if you want to pronounce the salutation "hail" expressively, you'd better not think of hailstones as you say it. Do you ever get like the sense that you're trying really hard to give someone the benefit of the doubt, or you're just really worried that like you're not getting it? That's where I am right now. That's absolutely where I am right now. So, I guess when we're thinking about things in this sort of abstract way, we have to sort of put it to the side that we can do more than one thing at one time. I mean, I couldn't possibly express the number of times that I've said something or constructed a sentence and sort of simultaneously realized the multiple meanings or the homonyms in the sentence or whatever it was that could apply to mean completely different things, and yet still been expressive and had the intent of saying what I meant to say, although there was like a point at which the decision was made to say X. And then at that point I'm saying X, and as I'm saying X, I'm not really thinking about saying X anymore. I already made the decision to say X. I could be thinking about other things at that time, and it's in that time where I might be thinking, well, that's a sort of strange way to phrase it, and yet that's the way I'm phrasing it. Thinking about, like, I don't feel like, this does refer back to like what he was talking about before when we were talking about, like, you don't think of what to say as you say it. You have to think about what you say before you say it. And sometimes you might think further ahead than others, but you're always, unless you're really, really doing stream of consciousness rambling, you're always thinking about what you're going to say, and then you make the decision to say it, and then you do the saying, right? It's impossible to speak as quickly as you think. So if I decide that I'm going to say the Pledge of Allegiance, right? As I'm saying the Pledge of Allegiance, I'm not thinking, or I don't have to be thinking about the Pledge of Allegiance. Likewise, I make the decision to express a thought to you, and perhaps because of whatever the fuck, weirdnesses of our languages, it takes me 5 seconds to express that thought. My brain just doesn't sit there for 5 seconds and do nothing. Oh, good night, Ms. Thank you for hanging out. Unless you're Donald Trump, pretty sure there's zero rendering between thinking and speaking. I'm not sure what you mean there, because like you seem to be implying that like Donald Trump doesn't think before he speaks, but you're saying zero rendering between thinking and speaking. Therefore, you're saying the thinking has already happened, right? I'm going to barrel ahead and hope that this becomes a little more clear to me as we go. 10. Experiencing a meaning and experiencing a mental image. In both cases, one would like to say one is experiencing something, only something different. A different content is presented to stands before consciousness. What is the content of the experience of the imagining? The answer is a picture or a description. And what is the content of the experience of the meaning? I don't know how I should answer. If there's any sense in the above remark, it is that the two concepts stand next to each other as red does to blue, and that's wrong. This is similar to like what I was just talking about, right? Like, what is the experience of a meaning? Okay, so it's really clear like what the experience of imagining is. But the experience of a meaning, I can't put my finger on it. Huh. I've never actually like really thought about it that way before. 11. Can one keep hold of understanding a meaning as one can keep hold of a mental image? That is, if one meaning of a word suddenly occurs to me, can it also remain there before my mind? 12. The whole plan came to my mind at a stroke and stayed there like that for 5 minutes. Why does this sound odd? One would like to think what struck me and what stayed there in my mind cannot have been the same. 13. I exclaimed, "Now I've got it." I gave a sudden start, and then I was able to present the plan in detail. What is supposed to have stayed in this case? A picture, perhaps, but "now I've got it" did not mean I've got a picture. Okay. I feel like I'm getting this a little more. 14, if the meaning of a word has occurred to someone and he has not forgotten it, he can now use the word in such and such a way. To a person whom the meaning has occurred now knows it, and its occurring to him was the beginning of his knowing it. Then how is this like an experience of imagining something? Okay. So the knowing, okay, the knowing is abstracted from the meaning, which is abstracted from the speaking or the transmission of the language. And then how is this like the experience of imagining something? I don't know the answer to that. Oh, look, it uses my name in the next one. If I say, Mr. Scott is not a Scot, I mean the first Scott as a proper name, the second one as a common name. Come on, call me a common name. Must what went on in my mind at the first Scott differ from what went on in the second? Yeah. Yes. Yes. Okay. I think we're there now. Unless I'm uttering the sentence parrot-wise, which happens, right? Like we have, just like we had this ostensive learning when we're talking about like figuring out how to assign phonetic sounds to concepts like numbers and groups and colors and that kind of thing. You also have the ability to parrot things that are really common. It might be just something that like, you've had to say a lot, or if, for instance, you're a teacher, right, and you have to explain the same thing over and over again, you might be parroting it. But if you're not parroting it and you say, Mr. Scott is not a Scot, and you mean the first as a proper name, the second as a common name, this is where I still think, what went on in my mind at the first Scott differ from what went on at the second? Because if I'm saying something like, Johnny America is not an American, if someone introduces me to Johnny America, and Johnny America is from Ireland, and then I say Johnny America is not an American, I had the thought to say that. It happened in however long it happens. It doesn't happen as I say Johnny America is not an American. It already happened. Now I'm just saying the words to represent the thought, and my thoughts are most likely at that point a few sentences ahead, maybe trying to think of what to say next or where to go next, or or maybe what I want for lunch, or who knows, right? I'm still trying to figure out the context a little bit here, Victoria. I feel like we're talking now more about the speaker than the listener, and what goes on in the head of a communicator of an idea than in the head of the person receiving the idea. And if these ideas, if the communication of these ideas somehow has to dance along with them like a bouncing ball in a karaoke machine or something, which is not the way that I think, but I guess it doesn't matter, right? Like whether you let's say, where are my notebooks? Empty page here. It's kind of like the fact that this book has the German translation, or I'm sorry, the English translation on the right side of every set of pages, and the original German on the left side. And yet it manages to keep it all in sync by introducing these blank spaces when they would be starting to go out of sync, right? Like if I'm saying something and it takes me, that, oh, you can't see that at all, can you? Thanks to this lookup table. Let's do this again. All right. Something takes me that long to say, but it only takes me that long to think, right? What's going on in my head? What's going on in my head here? It's kind of hard to draw a bracket upside down like that, right? Probably what's going on in my head are a bunch of things like this. Right? And this might be the line that's coming after this, or it might be like me trying to speculate what the response to this is going to be and what my potential response to that response is. Who knows? But I'm not sitting there thinking about the words that I'm saying as I'm saying them. Old Man Hiver, it's been a bit. Yes, that is exactly what we're doing. I don't think he gives a tinker's cuss about helping speakers communicate better. I think he's interested in what's actually going on when you do it. Let's see here, Ryan. So the one that initiates the communication between two people kind of sets the tone for the discussion. Is that what it's trying to say? I don't see it that way. I feel like it's not really, I don't feel like it's really gotten into discourse. I think it's really trying to like zero in on the most fundamental building blocks of what goes on in your head as you think about concepts that you're trying to express, and once you express them, and then I see this as a codec, right? Which would have been a great analogy for him to have. I mean, really, like he had it, right? A codec is an encoder, decoder, right? So it compresses an amount of data, the part of it, and then the deck part of it is it then decodes it. So just like you would encrypt something, right? It sounds like he's very concerned about how he might be misinterpreted. I don't know. I'm not getting that. I'm getting that he is, no, I'm not getting that. I'm not getting that at all. What I'm getting is that he is very concerned. He's just trying to figure out, like, at what point you are determining the difference between thinking and speaking. The difference between, and when I say speaking, I don't mean saying words. The difference between communicating and the initial thought that organizes and allows you to determine what it is that you want to communicate. So is it the thoughts that your brain have between when you decide what you want to say and you have finished speaking? Ryan, that's what I was trying to sort of illustrate with these beautiful timelines, which now, of course, are lost somewhere in this book, which is a songbook, so I shouldn't have dirtied it up with a bunch of lines. It's a songbook that has some of the drawings on my Some did on Minecraft creatures. Anyway, yes. Yeah, if we imagine that you think about what you're going to say and then you say it, but it takes you significantly longer to say it than it does for you to think about it. This is public domain, I believe. So feel free to look up Wittgenstein's philosophical investigations. All right. So for this, Mr. Scott is not a Scot, or Johnny America is not an American. Try to mean the first Scot as a common name and the second one as a proper name. And that's, okay. That's the inverse of what it actually is. How does one do it? When I do it, I blink with effort as I try to display to myself the right meaning of each of the two words. But in their ordinary use, do I also display their meanings to myself? So I kind of feel like what he's saying here is like this phrase, which I almost wish I had now the separate cameras where I could zoom up here. But like this phrase here, Mr. Scott is not a Scot. Like let's look at that a little bit closer by writing it. In a way that can be hopefully read, right? Here we go. Mr. Scott is not a Scot. So proper name, common name, right? When I get the impulse to express this, it happens almost immediately. And it happens with the order being proper name, common name. And so I don't really have any sort of cognitive dissonance when I'm saying Mr. Scott is not a Scot. However, if I specifically want it to be the inverse, if I'm saying something that is counter to what might normally be expressed in that situation, then I do have to think about it. And it does become more difficult. I think what he might be saying here is almost that, and this is interesting to me because this is the way that I read and the way that I suspect like some people do read, is that we view this as just a word. Like a sentence is just a long word. And it has the meaning, and we're making the noises to express this thing that we want to express. And when we have something that we know from beginning to end, and it's common, and it's something that we are familiar with, it's very easy for us to do that. But if I told you to say swap, if I told you to take the word onomatopoeia and swap the third syllable with the second syllable, you'd have to think about that for a minute. Not for the same reason. That's a bad example. But it's the best one I've got right now. Okay, so how does one do it? When I do it, I blink with effort. Right, I already read that. Okay, 16. When I utter that sentence with these switched meanings, its sense disintegrates for me. It disintegrates for me, but not for the person I'm saying it to. So for the person you're saying it to, they don't care if you think the common name is first or the proper name is first. To them, they are going to interpret it. They're bringing their own preconceived ideas of what it is that you're saying to the conversation, right? So you say Mr. Scott is not a Scot. And in my head, I'm like, well, little did they know. But when I just said that, what I actually meant was Mr. Scott, common name, is not a Scot, proper name. But to them, unless actually, their name actually wasn't Scott, but they were Scottish, to them, they would still just interpret it the same way. Interesting. So the meaning then disintegrates for the speaker, but not for the person that that it's being spoken to. So what harm is done? But still, when one utters the sentence in the usual way, something else takes place. What takes place is not this displaying the meaning. Not sure what he means there. What makes my mental image of him into an image of him? Not any pictorial likeness. The same question applies to the utterance, I see him now vividly before me, as to the image. What makes this utterance into an utterance about him? Nothing in it or simultaneous with it behind it. If you want to know whom he meant, ask him. Yet it's also possible for me to visualize a face and even draw it without my knowing whose it is or where I've seen it. Suppose that while imagining, or instead of imagining, someone were to draw, even only in the air with a finger, this might be called motor imagery, right? Here one might ask, whom does that represent? And the answer would be decisive. It's as if he had given a verbal description, which, after all, can also take the place of an image. Right, so if I do this, if I say, Old Man Hiver, I am drawing you. It's my picture of Old Man Hiver, everybody. I'm almost positive this is exactly what Old Man Hiver looks like. But it doesn't matter if it's not what he looks like. I've expressed that this is my mental image of him. Just like in words, if I would have said Mr. Scott is not a Scot, I'm expressing what it is that I mean when I say that. Is it like, this is close, isn't it? Right? Maybe it's not. All right. "19. I believe that he's suffering. Do I also believe that he isn't an... What? Really? What? Okay. This is taking a turn. I believe that he is suffering. Do I also believe that he isn't an automaton? Only reluctantly could I use the word in both contexts. Or is it like this? I believe that he is suffering, but am certain that he is not an automaton. Nonsense. So, taking it as read, that the idea here is that we have to remember when this was written, right? An automaton wouldn't be able to suffer. So the implication is, if you believe that someone is suffering, you believe they are not an automaton. I'm not really sure why I believe that he's suffering, but I'm certain that he's not an automaton would be nonsense. I guess okay. I guess that's the equivalency there, right? Like, if you believe someone is suffering, then you can also believe, or you should also believe, that they're not an automaton in this context. Do machines feel pain? It's not a question that was being asked in the late 19th, early 20th century. Or maybe it was. Maybe people were constructing these little clockwork automaton, being like, does it feel pain? I'm glad you all appreciate my artistic ability. So he's saying a person can identify themselves or something when it's been declared as something no matter the context. Yes, this is what I think is being done here, right? If somebody says an apple is an apple, it's an apple. Right. And then it's up to the Gestalt entity that is society, or perhaps, Strunk White or Webster's, to ultimately determine if that definition sticks. Okay. Suppose I say of a friend, he isn't an automaton. Dude, Wittgenstein was getting into the automata. What information is conveyed by this? And to whom would it be information? Oh. To a human being who meets him in very ordinary circumstances, what information could it give him, at the very most, that this man always behaves like a human being and not occasionally like a machine? Hey, Old Man Hiver is not an automaton, because they would have come up with a better design than that if he were. I believe that he is not an automaton, just like that. So far, makes no sense. Okay, so we have to take into account like the beliefs of the time, right? Because the next thing here, right? My attitude towards him is an attitude towards a soul. I am not of the opinion that he has a soul. Religion teaches that the soul can exist when the body has disintegrated. Now, do I understand what it teaches? Of course I understand it. I can imagine various things in connection with it. After all, pictures of these things have even been painted. And why should such a picture be only an imperfect rendering of the idea expressed? Well, I mean, it always is, isn't it? Oh, good night, Lisa. I hope you feel better. Why should it not do the same service as the spoken doctrine? And it's a service that counts. Actually, now I'm second guessing myself, because you're right. Right. Yeah. So, I hate to tell you this, Old Man Hiver. At least as far as the service that this drawing conveys, this is a perfect representation of you. As perfect a representation of you as if I were to say your name, Old Man Hiver. Apotheosis through likeness. I like that. I'll accept it. But that's interesting because, we're all, it does fly counter to this idea that nothing can ever be perfectly represented in a painting. It's always going to be an approximation, in artists, or at least, from the school of realism, would really try to approach, would try to approach as realistic of a representation as possible. However, the idea is that, you can never have a perfect representation. However, if a perfect representation of someone is just pointing at them and saying, that person right there, for the express terms of an idea and getting communication and ideas across, me saying, you there, person, right, is as effective as me painting a perfect representation of that person and holding it up and saying, them there. In fact, it's arguably better for me to just go, you there, right? That is even clearer. And if we're talking about what is the intent, if the intent was for someone to for lack of a better phrase, since we really shouldn't be using this phrase in this context. If you're pixel peeping the image and you're like, well, you drew a mustache that, ends the wrong part of the filtrum, you've made the filtrum too long or whatever. If you make this imperfect representation for the purposes of expressing the idea applying to the person that you're painting, it's probably a lot clearer to everybody, and it's also going to take less time. If I just go, that person right there. If I just go, I'm talking about this person right here. Orko. Is that Orko, Old Man Hiver? By the way, this is an aside. Looks like Orko, but a little different. Obscure horror. Look, I'm fixing your name in my head as I look at it. Glad to see you. Glad that you're here. Yeah, Letitia, I think that. Oh man, I love that PFP. Oh man, I love it. Oh, I gotta make that bigger. The drawing and someone's name are both symbols, and their purpose is to make you think about the person. Exactly. Exactly right. The thing is, Old Man Hiver, it's not exactly Orko, is it? It's not the Orko I remember. The colors are different, aren't they? Is this why people hate looking at photos of themselves or voice recordings? We actually talked a little bit about this last time. And I think it does have something to do with like a perfect representation. Well, no, we're not objective. We're not objective. So there's no way to get around it. Okay, let's get back to talking about automatons. Okay. Is the picture of thoughts in the head, if the picture of thoughts in the head can force itself upon us, then why not much more that of thoughts in the mind or soul? Okay, I don't believe in souls, but I'm sticking with. Yeah, see, I actually thought. This is what I actually thought. Blarg 65 looked more like maybe something that just resembled Orko. All right, so let me be generous here. If the picture of thoughts in the head can force itself upon us, then why not much more that of thoughts in the mind or soul? What's the difference between mind and head? Like he's making a distinction here between thoughts in the head and thoughts in the mind. I don't quite get that. 25, the human body is the best picture of the human soul. 26, but how about an expression like this? When you said that, I understood it in my heart. In saying this, one points at one's heart. And doesn't one mean this gesture? Of course one means it. Or one is aware of using a mere picture. Certainly not. It's not a picture that we choose, not a simile, yet it is a graphic expression. Suppose we were observing the movement of a point, for example, a point of light on a screen. Important inferences of the most varied kinds could be drawn from the behavior of this point. And what a variety of observations could be made here. The path of the point, certain of its characteristics, measures its amplitude, its wavelength, for instance, the velocity and the law according to which it varies, the number or position of the places in which it changes discontinuously, the curvature of the path of these places, innumerable other things. Any of these features of its behavior might be the only one to interest us. We might, for example, be indifferent to everything about its path, except for the number of loops it makes in a certain time. And if we were interested not just in one such feature, but in several, each might yield us special information, different in kind from all the rest. This is how it is with the behavior of man, with the different characteristics that we observe in this behavior. Yeah, okay. I mean, yes. I'm not sure how that applies to what we were just talking about. Hold on a second here. I mean, that went on a bit of a tangent. Ryan, why are you doing that? Oh, well, I'm sorry that you have to go. You don't need to super chat. I'm reading everything everybody says. But that's super kind of you. I don't know what to make of this. The different characteristics of the point of light on the screen and relating that to human behaviors. Yes, humans have varied behaviors. Yes, a point of light could have different characteristics than we might be interested in some of them and not interested in others. Maybe there's another point being gotten to here, but I feel like we haven't resolved the earlier point. So it feels to me a little bit like he's going on a tangent. 28. Then psychology treats of behavior, not of mind. What does a psychologist report? What does he observe? Isn't it the behavior of people, in particular their utterances? But these are not about their behavior. 29. I noticed that he was out of humor. Is this a report about his behavior or his state of mind? Well, very well be both, right? One being causative of the other. The sky looks threatening. Is this about the present or the future? Both, not side by side, however, but about one thing via the other. Yes. 30. A doctor asks, how is he feeling? The nurse says, he is groaning. That's a report on behavior. But need there be any question for the two of them whether the groaning is really genuine, is really the expression of anything? Might they not, for example, draw the conclusion, if he groans, we must give him more analgesic, without suppressing a middle term? Isn't what counts the service to which they put the description of the behavior? This almost seems like antithetical to what he was talking about before. Because in the case of, okay, the patient is groaning, give analgesic, then we're essentially skipping the decoding or the encoding and decoding, the encoding, rationale, decoding, and recoding part of the steps of we go through before we arrive at this equals give analgesic, right? Hey, Nova. I don't think you're out of your depth. I'm feeling a little bit like this is a little simplistic, right? And I feel like I don't know. If you're out of your depth, I'm out of my depth too. I really like your profile picture. Was it drawn by anyone that we might know? Kind of looks like a Neo-Alex drawing. So I don't know. Like, to me, this kind of like a lot of this just seems pretty self-evident. And I realize like a lot of philosophy can seem self-evident, but that just means you're not paying close enough attention. But sometimes, sometimes a sausage is just a sausage. All right. So I'm confused by that, like wanting to remove the middle step there of interpreting what the groan means and then re-encoding it to be like, well, it means we must give analgesic, right? Like, it does seem like the most effective way. And I do feel like we're then going back to this idea of words and sentences and language and expression as symbolic equivocals of the things that you would do to address them. But hell, what do I know? 31, but then they made the tacit presupposition. Then playing our language game always rests on the tacit presupposition. So at least there he's making the same argument, right? So they didn't have to talk about it, right? They just did it, or they both came to the same conclusion. Blarg 65 seems like a reaction to the behaviorist school of thought that was big in his day. Well, I'm reading it in the context of postmodernist. So maybe that is why it does seem like a little bit, it's feeling a bit redundant. 32, I describe a psychological experiment, the apparatus, the questions of the experimenter, the actions and the replies of the subject. And then I say it's a scene in a play. Oh, now everything has changed. So one will observe, if this experiment were described in the same way in a book on psychology, then the description of the behavior would be understood as an expression of something mental, precisely because it is presupposed that the subject is not taking us in, hasn't learnt the replies by heart. Okay, this is addressing all the stuff we were just talking about, and other things of the kind. So in this case, are we making a presupposition? Would we ever really express ourselves like this? Naturally, I am presupposing that. Or do we not do so only because the other person already knows this? This is, we were talking about like phatic sort of preludes to statements that we don't need to make. Like they're taken as read, right? I do like this now though, right? So you describe an experiment and everything about the experiment. And then at the end you say, oh, I'm talking about a scene in a play. So that just completely, that context changes everything, right? But if this experiment were described in a book on psychology, the description of the behavior would be understood as an expression of something mental, precisely because it's presupposed that the subject is not taking us in, hasn't learnt the replies by heart, and other things of the kind. So the idea here, it seems to me, is like, okay, we have amongst, like, a common agreement amongst us. There's a sort of common pool of things that we understand and we don't need to say over and over again, and are given by things like context. And if you apply that to something like the groaning patient, right? Giving analgesic to the groaning patient, unless you had the context that, hey, this patient is, say, an actor and is trying to perfect his groan for a staging of the Scottish play. You would never really need to say something like, naturally I'm presupposing. It is the same thing as when I am always saying, always being far too careful to do things like, look, this is just my opinion I'm about to express here, and I could be completely wrong. Or the idea of saying, using a cadence that goes up at the end and always implies that everything that you say is a question, or asking the question right at the end of every statement that you make, because it's like self-soothing in a way, right? Right? Oh, okay. No, I didn't. Okay. I thought maybe this was done by somebody who I know who does portraits. 33. Doesn't a presupposition exist when a doubt exists? And doubt may be entirely lacking. Doubting has an end. There's a similarity here to the way in which the physical object and the sense impressions stand next to each other. We have here two language games. Oh, I think I just had like a little eureka. We have here two language games, and their mutual relations are of a complex kind. If one tries to reduce the relations to a simple formula, one goes wrong. So doesn't a presupposition exist when a doubt exists? Do I always actually doubt everything that I say when I say right at the end? I don't, and I don't think most people do. Doubt may be entirely lacking. Doubting has an end. There's a similarity here in the way in which physical object and sense impressions stand to each other. We have here two language games, and their mutual relations are of a complicated kind. If one tries to reduce their relations to a simple formula, one goes wrong. So that's, I guess, the mini eureka that I feel like I had there was the interplay of the two types of language games that he's talking about. Damn. Is that the end of this section? Are you not going to give me more? Okay, good. It's giving me a little bit more. Oh. Hey. That's Elizabeth right there. I may sound like a thoughtful authority, but I have no clue what's going on here. All right, it's not done yet. It was another one of those like large spaces that they put to try and keep the German and the English in sync with each other. So, okay, suppose someone said every familiar word in a book, for example, actually carries an atmosphere with it in our minds, a corona of faintly indicated uses. Just as if each figure in a painting were surrounded by delicate, shadowy drawings of scenes, as if it were in another dimension, and in them we saw the figures in different contexts. Let's take this assumption very seriously. Then it turns out that it cannot explain intentionality. If the possible uses of a word are before our minds in half-tones as we say or hear it, this goes just for us. Okay, so that is what we were talking about before. And yet we communicate with other people without knowing whether they're having these experiences as well, right? So we have the thought, we have the sketch of Old Man Hyber, which is a perfect representation, right? At least insofar as we know what it's referring to. We don't need to think about what it is that we want to express, or rather we did think about it, and now we're in the process of expressing it. And we're making assumptions about how what we're communicating is being understood by the person that we're expressing it to. The delicate, shadowy figures of scenes, as if they were in another dimension. Damn. Yeah, there can exist a lot of anxiety around being misconstrued. Intent can be communicated through preamble in a way that getting to the point may not. Context as anesthetic. Right, but ultimately, like, you're getting in your own way there. I mean, I think that it's probably pretty clear, like, the ideal way to communicate is to abandon that and kind of, I hate to say it like this, but like be the loudest voice in the room. Well, that's on you. I would expect that from someone who looks like this. Yeah. I mean, I feel like I'm trying to meet him halfway here as well. I mean, a brilliant thinker, right? So maybe I'm trying too hard to meet him halfway. Hey, Whispering Ava, good evening. Good to see you. Searching for the Wikipedia page for Wittgenstein. Yeah, no, this is a follow-up to a video from Friday. He's a philosopher who cared a lot about word games. It's actually snowing in New York. It's not snow. It has not yet to snow in DC at all this year, and I'm not sad about it. So 36, what would we reply to someone who told us that with him understanding was an inner process? What would we reply to him if he said that with him knowing how to play chess was an inner process? This, to me, like, this is striking at something that resonates with me because of something that we talked about earlier. The idea that, right, I hate to keep showing this, but not this part now, right? So Mr. Scott is not a Scott, right? The proper and the common usage of Scott in both of those. And the fact that, like, you know, I feel like most people, when they read a sentence like this, and the more pedestrian the sentence and the more common the words used in the sentence, probably the more likely this is to happen. But you don't really read it as a sentence. You read it as a big word, you know, and the spaces are there to kind of space out the syllables. What's the difference between one big long word and a sentence? It's arbitrary, right? And when you read enough, especially, you know, in the way Western books are laid out, actually maybe it's even easier in the way Eastern books are laid out. I just don't know. Typically, you know, books are just wide enough that with two eyes, you don't need to move your eyes from left to right to read a line. You're just going up and down. But I feel like what he's getting at here is like, we just don't know the inner lives of the people that we're trying to communicate with, or how they're interpreting what we're saying, or even how they're like interpreting these preambles that we're sort of obsessively tacking on to the beginning and or end of anything we say that we have any doubt about, which is almost everything, right? So what would we reply to someone who told us that with him, understanding was an inner process? What would we reply to him if he said that with him knowing how to play chess was an inner process, or reading backwards was an inner process? We'd say that when we want to know if he can play chess, we aren't interested in anything that goes on inside him. I mean, I guess technically we're not, right? But it is interesting on its face. Right? If he retorts that this is, in fact, just what we are interested in, there you go. He does do this a lot, right? Like, I feel like he's writing stuff that makes you want to say, wait a minute, Ludwig, what about this? And then a paragraph or two later, or in this case, a sentence or two later, he will address he's a troll a bit. And if he retorts that this is in fact just what we are interested in, that is whether he can play chess, then we would have to draw his attention to the criteria which would demonstrate his ability, and on the other hand, to the criteria for inner states. Even if someone had a particular ability, only when and only as long as he had a particular feeling, the feeling is not the ability. Look, I mean, I can definitely say that like the words that Wittgenstein is writing here are causing me to think about things in ways I have not thought about before. Like specifically, did I not highlight it? He pivoted away from automatons pretty quickly though, didn't he? Right. So the idea, okay, yeah, the person, yeah, this. The fact that we generally, or at least I have always thought that a picture cannot be a perfect representation of a thing or an idea or a thought, but from this point of view, it can, and in fact, it can be a better representation than addressing, or as good a representation as calling someone by name or pointing at them. Okay, so if someone had the particular ability only when and only as long as they have a particular feeling, that it still doesn't make the feeling the ability. So we don't want to equate the ostensive teaching of the idea of when you say, where's something I can pull out here. So 5 of hearts, right? A card. 7 of diamonds. Queen of diamonds. It's pretty clear, right, when I say this is the 5 of hearts that I'm referring to this card. I could have no idea, what the relationships are of the different suits or the numbers of the cards. I could look at this and say, this is a 5 of hearts, and I could know that there are 5 hearts on here. The word that I know as 5, it doesn't necessarily follow, if I can find another hearts here. It doesn't necessarily follow that then when you show me this card that I know that this is the 6 of hearts, right? I just know when you say the word 5, this is the amount of objects that you're referring to, right? I don't know that. I'm not yet versed in the concept of numbers. Oh, Lucy, that's super kind. Thank you. And this goes back to like talking about using the system to describe the system, which of course one can do, but you don't need to understand the system to use mimicry and just sort of relational x equals y to know certain things like 3 red apples, right? So the meaning of the word is not the experience one has in hearing or uttering it, and the sense of a sentence is not a complex of these experiences. Ooh, I feel like he's getting to like a point where he's going to call into question the sort of equivocal nature of, the equivocal nature of words and sentences. How is the sense of the sentence, I haven't seen him yet, composed? Oh, right here he's doing it. How is the sense of the sentence, I haven't seen him yet, composed of the meaning of its words? The sentence is composed of the words, and that is enough. Though one would like to say every word can have a different character in different contexts. That would be the Scot is not a Scot. Johnny America is not an American. Actually, it would have to be Johnny American. No, Johnny American is not an American. I hope I didn't cause any confusion with that earlier. Every word can have a different character in different contexts. At the same time, there's a single character. It always has a face. It looks at us after all. But a face in a painting looks at us too. So the face representing the actual meaning of what's being said, and the represent now, like we're talking, I feel like we're talking about like Magritte and this is not a pipe kind of abstraction, right? Are you sure that there is a single if feeling and not perhaps several? Have you tried saying the word in a great variety of contexts? For example, when it bears the principal stress of the sentence and when the following word does. I'm finding it difficult to parse the way that you're intending some of these sentences, Ludwig. Suppose we found a man who, speaking of how words felt to him, told us that if and but felt the same. May we not believe him? We may think it strange. He doesn't play our game at all, one would like to say. Or even, this is a different kind of human being. If he used the words if and but as we do, wouldn't we think he understood them as we do? That's kind of interesting too. There's just, that's like the whole thing of like, right, I say something is red, you agree that this is red. It doesn't mean that we're seeing the same red, even though the wavelengths are the same of light, right? Like our visual cortex might interpret things in different ways. There's just like all these assumptions that we make based on this idea that we have a shared understanding of things like the words if and but, which is, I don't know, man. It feels like it'd be very easy to, you know what would be like really easy to do? I mean, it'd be easy to be misunderstood, right? But this is this is exactly what I'm doing here. I am reading this book by an esteemed philosopher. I am trying to understand the context in which he is using these words to describe how people understand words. I am giving him as much of a benefit of the doubt as possible. He doesn't need to say right at the end of every sentence, right? He doesn't need to say, it is my opinion that, right? He's Ludwig fucking Wittgenstein. He's just saying the shit he wants to say. And it's, there's certainly an argument that it's right. But it's also kind of, it's cyclical in a way, because in me trying to make sense out of it, or in you, the listener, trying to make sense out of it, you're making your own sense out of it. I'm making my own sense out of it. Is it the sense that was intended? And now are we back to the whole Roland Barthes death of the author? Like if we come to a conclusion that is valid, but was not the conclusion that Wittgenstein intended us to come to, does that make the language that he used to get us to come to that conclusion any less valid? I don't know that it does. I don't feel like it does. Hey, Selleck. Selleck? Oh, thank you. Oh, Slim Thick Skinny Queen. Hi. I hope you're doing well in school as well. Not as well. Hope you're doing well in school. I appreciate that. Victoria, am I enjoying the reading experience? I think I probably could have started with something that I had a little more grounding in. I wanted to kind of like throw myself into a deep end of an area, maybe I didn't understand that well, or I didn't have a lot of previous context for. Kind of like Joe Rogan does.
Isn't that a big part of the tides? Is the gravity that comes from the moon? Is that what causes the tides?
That was not loud enough. Come on, Joe. Ask us the hard questions.
Isn't that a big part of the tides? Is the gravity that comes from the moon? Is that what causes the tides?
Okay. So just because someone uses words the way that we do, it's a mistake to assume that they understand them the way that we do. It could all just be like a mimetic charade. This could all be ostentative learning. One misjudges the psychological interest of the if feeling if one regards it as the obvious correlate of its meaning. It needs rather to be seen in a different context, in that of the special circumstances in which it occurs. So I'm assuming that this means that you can use a pair of scissors to open a bottle. You can use a pair of scissors if it's heavy enough, to kind of hammer in a nail. But until I see you use a pair of scissors to cut a piece of paper or something, I don't really 100% know that you know what scissors are for, right? Does a person never have the if feeling? This is giving me shades of Douglas Hofstadter. Does a person never have the if feeling unless he is uttering the word if? That makes me want to break this out. That makes me want to read the crab canon from Douglas Hofstadter. And in fact, I'm going to do it because I don't think I've ever done it on this channel. I think I've only done it on the podcast channel. So, Douglas Hofstadter, and in fact, Gödel, Escher, Bach. Gödel was, Gödel and Wittgenstein, hand in hand. Best buddies. So the crab canon in this book, by the way, I highly recommend it. Maybe one that hasn't been devoured by roaches or whatever happened while this was in my attic a long time ago. But the Eternal Golden Braid. So see if you can spot what is strange about this very, very short interaction between a tortoise and Achilles. What is odd about this? Okay. Tortoise, good day, Mr. A. Achilles, why, same to you. Tortoise, so nice to run into you. Achilles, that echoes my thoughts. Tortoise, and it's a perfect day for a walk. I think I'll be walking home soon. Achilles, oh really? I guess there's nothing better for you than walking. Tortoise, incidentally, you're looking in very fine fettle these days, I must say. Achilles, thank you very much. Tortoise, not at all. Here, care for one of my cigars? Achilles, oh, you are such a Philistine. In this area, the Dutch contributions are of markedly inferior taste, don't you think? Tortoise, I disagree in this case, but speaking of taste, I finally saw that crab cannon by your favorite artist, M.C. Escher, in a gallery the other day, and I fully appreciate the beauty and ingenuity with which he made one single theme mesh with itself, going both backwards and forwards. But I'm afraid I'll always feel Bach is superior to Escher. Achilles, I don't know, but one thing is for certain. I don't worry about arguments of taste. De gustibus non est disputandum. Tortoise, tell me, what's it like to be your age? Is it true that one has no worries at all? Achilles, to be precise, one has no frets. Tortoise, oh well, it's all the same to me. Achilles, fiddle, it makes a big difference, you know. Tortoise, say, don't you play the guitar? Achilles, that's my good friend. He often plays, the fool. But I myself wouldn't touch a guitar with a 10-foot pole. Crab, hello, what's up, what's new? You see this bump, this lump, given to me by a grump? And on such a fine day, you see, I was just idly loafing about the park when up lumbers this giant fellow from Warsaw, a colossal bear of a man, playing a lute. He was 3 meters tall if I'm a day. I mosey on up to this chap, reach skyward, and manage to tap him on the knee, saying, "Pardon me, sir, but you're polluting our park with your mazurkas." But wow, he had no sense of humor, not a bit, not a whit, and pow, he lets loose and belts me smack in the eye. Were in my nature, I would crab up a storm, but in the time-honored tradition of my species, I backed off. After all, when we walk forward, we move backwards. It's in our genes, you know, turning round and around. That reminds me, I've always wondered, which came first, the crab or the gene? That is to say, which came last, the gene or the crab? I'm always turning things round and round, you know. It's in our genes. After all, when we walk backwards, we move forward. Ay me, oh my, I must lope along my merry way. So off I go on such a fine day. Sing ho for the life of a crab, ta-ta, ole. Tortoise, that's my good friend. He often plays the fool. but I myself wouldn't touch a 10-foot pole with a guitar. Achilles. Say, don't you play guitar? Tortoise. Fiddle. It makes a big difference, you know. Achilles. Oh, well, it's all the same to me. Tortoise. To be precise, one has no frets. Achilles. Tell me, what's it like to be your age? Is it true that one has no worries at all? Tortoise. I don't know, but one thing for certain is I don't worry about arguments of taste. Disputandum non est de gustibus. Achilles. I disagree in this case, but speaking of taste, I finally heard that crab canon by your favorite composer J.S. Bach in a concert the other day, and I fully appreciate the beauty and ingenuity in which he made one single theme mesh with itself, going both backwards and forwards. But I'm afraid I'll always feel Escher is superior to Bach. Tortoise. Oh, you are such a Philistine. In this area, the Dutch contributions are of markedly inferior taste, don't you think? Achilles. Not at all. Here, care for one of my cigars? Tortoise. Thank you very much. Achilles. Incidentally, you're looking in very fine fettle these days, I must say. Tortoise. Oh, really? I guess there's nothing better for you than walking. Achilles. And it's a perfect day for a walk. I think I'll be walking home soon. Tortoise. That echoes my thoughts. Achilles. So nice to run into you. Tortoise. Why, same to you. Achilles. Good day, Mr. T. So, that was a dialogue between the tortoise and Achilles, with an interruption by the crab in the middle. And the conversation is a canon in that it is forward for the first part and then backwards for the second part. In the same way that Memento is backward and forward, right? It is the words of every sentence are not aligned backwards, just like the scenes in the movie Memento were not played backwards. They were just organized backwards. So each sentence here repeats in a backwards order once you hit the crab. Why did I bring that up? Memories. Look, not a lot has changed, really. More baggage, I suppose. All right. Yeah, so the reason I brought that up was because of one misjudges the psychological interest of the if feeling if one regards it as the obvious correlate of a meaning. It needs rather to be seen in a different context, that of the special circumstances in which it occurs. If I were to see you hammering in a nail with a pair of scissors, I might think you don't know how to use a pair of scissors. So just the fact that you can use the word if in a way that is functional isn't enough. You need to use it in sort of the specific way that it's meant to be used, or a way that like precludes me seeing you happen to use it correctly out of sheer luck. The if feeling should be comparable to the special feeling which a musical phrase gives us. One sometimes describes such a feeling by saying, here it is, as if a conclusion were being drawn, or I should like to say therefore, or here I should always like to make a gesture, and then one makes it. 45, but can this feeling be separated from the phrase? And yet it's not the phrase itself, for someone can hear it without this feeling. Is it in this respect similar to the expression with which the phrase is played? So I like this. I like that it's drawing this parallel between, the way one, music is language, right? And phrasing is phrasing, whether they're words or notes. And you could take, Beethoven's pathetic melody and play it in double time with a swing beat, and it might make you crack a smile. Victoria, I should do a Donnie Darko video. It would mesh with my video format. I was not like as huge a Donnie Darko fan as a lot of other people were. I probably should watch it again. It's been a long time. Hey, Doug from Brazil. Ole, 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 ole. Yeah, so I absolutely agree with this. Like, I often will feel paralyzed by a lack of a structural set of rules or framework or set of limitations. Like, give me something to hang things on. Don't make me build the structure on which to hang things. Give me the structure to hang things on, and then I'll generally be much better at hanging the things on that structure. Give me a blank canvas and I'm hopeless. What are you going to do? Okay, we're almost, I think, at the end here. There's one more page before we get to the sort of end of this section. So assuming you actually understand how to use the word if, and you get the if feeling, but then, I mean, he says right here, the if feeling is not a feeling which accompanies the word if. The if feeling should be comparable to the feeling which a musical phrase gives us. Can this feeling be separated from the phrase? It's not the phrase itself, but someone can hear it without the feeling. That makes sense. Is it in this respect similar to the expression with which the phrase is played? We say this passage gives us a quite special feeling. We sing it to ourselves and at the same time make a certain movement and also perhaps some special feeling. But in a different context, we would not recognize these accompaniments, the movement, the feeling, at all. They're quite empty, except when we're just singing the passage. I'm having trouble now. I thought I was following, and now thrown for a loop. I sing it with a quite particular expression. This expression is not something that can be separated from the passage. It's a completely different concept, i.e. a different language game. Hey, Laura. Yeah, I'm doing the LA. Whatever, you know. The experience in this passage is played like this. That is, as I'm demonstrating, for instance, a description could only hint at it. An atmosphere that is inseparable from its object is no atmosphere. Oh. Closely associated things, things which have been associated, seem to fit one another. But why? Like, how does it come out that they seem to fit? Old Man Hiver, are you still around? We can't imagine the man who had this name, this face, this handwriting, not to have produced these great works, but perhaps quite different ones instead, those of another great man. We can't imagine it. Do we even try? It might be like this. I hear that someone is painting a picture, Beethoven writing the Ninth Symphony. I could easily imagine the kind of thing such a picture would show us. But suppose someone wanted to represent what Goethe would have looked like writing the Ninth Symphony. Here I could imagine nothing that would not be embarrassing and ridiculous. I could imagine Goethe writing the Ninth Symphony. I guess I'm. That's the end of this fragment. He's separated these into fragments, and I'm having trouble TLDRing this in my own brain. This might be. Did I skip a page? This making that noise? All right, I'm going to call it a night because I'm having trouble really thinking this stuff through. Maybe I started too late. But I hope you all have a good night. And thanks for hanging out and working through this. It's difficult to scrut. I don't know if it's inscrutable, but it's certainly difficult to scrut. Hope you all have a good day and a good evening. And I'll see y'all soon.